Introduce Alan. I'm sure he probably needs no introduction. But when we heard that he was willing to do this, we're only 12 days into this project anyway. So when we heard he was willing to do this, we were really excited to get it going and to get him going, and not just because of the success he's had and what he's doing and what he continues to do, but Alan truly embodies the vision of Feel for the Game. One thing that we do, the biggest thing that we want to do is we want to use our platform, use our passion to lift each other up, to influence others. And, we tell our players all the time, it's neat when you can use basketball as a platform to improve your lives, but to get scholarships or to go travel or to do all these different things, that's cool. But it's truly special to use your passion, to use your platform to improve others. And he's written Raise Your Game, and by now probably that's influenced millions. And he's out there and he's giving keynotes, and he's talking to global corporations now, and just the impact and the influence that he has from a platform or from the roots of basketball is really inspiring to us all. So Alan, thank you for being here.
Oh my goodness, my pleasure. This will be a lot of fun.
Let's get it started. True question answer format. I'm going to kind of back away and let other guys jump in. Heath, you want to get us started?
Yes, sure will. Again, Alan, thanks again for being on here. I'm Heath Howington, head coach at North Posey High School in Indiana and co-founder of Feel for the Game. I want to get right into it. I was listening to a podcast that you appeared on yesterday, and you talked about an experience you had with Steph Curry when he was a freshman at Davidson. You worked with him at a basketball camp, and you said that he would not leave the gym until he swished 5 free throws in a row. I'm sure that's something that stuck with you and you'll never forget. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Most certainly. One of the things that I was most impressed by with Steph the first time I met him, and to put this in context, sometimes it's hard for people to realize that, there was a Steph Curry before the global, sensation that he is now. That actually, when he was at this camp, he was very unknown. I mean, when you looked at the pedigree of the other college counselors that were there, Steph probably didn't belong, but thankfully someone did invite him. Because I mean, he was the consummate teammate, had tremendous work habits. I mean, he added so much value to that collection of college counselors that were there. But, watching Steph and how meticulous he was in his preparation and the habits that he was creating, I mean, it was obvious that this kid was just different. I mean, there was something different about him. And I remember being so impressed by his 5 swish rule before he left the gym. And I never did ask him about it, but as I've kind of unpacked it in my mind, it makes me think of a few things. One, I'm pretty sure he didn't start there. Like, I'm willing to bet that at a younger age, he said something to the effect of, I'm not going to leave the gym until I make 2 free throws in a row, or maybe swish 2, or maybe just make 5, or something like that. But I'm willing to bet that he over time progressed until he got to the point of swishing 5 before he left. And the reason I say that is certainly for any players listening, I'm not saying that you need to swish 5 free throws before you leave the gym, but it's probably a good idea to create some type of standard that you want to achieve every single workout, and that you are committed to achieving that, before you leave the gym. And each player listening needs to figure out what's appropriate for them and what's the best standard for them.
That's awesome. And speaking of high standards, Alan, you had an opportunity to work at DeMatha High School, one of the most elite programs in the country. What made DeMatha so special?
Well, it started with, having such a rich history. Morgan Wooten, who recently passed, was the head coach there for 47 years. I've been breathing for 44 years, and he was the head coach there for 47 years. And, he really hit national prominence when DeMatha Catholic High School beat Power Memorial, which had Lou Alcindor. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is how most people know him. And that was the only loss in Kareem's entire high school career, was to DeMatha. And that game got so much recognition on a national level, and you're talking back in the 60s, that it really put DeMatha and Coach Wooten on the map. And so it starts with this rich legacy and history. And, over the past 50 years, I mean, DeMatha's had, several dozen players make it to the NBA. So it started with this history and this legacy. And then when Coach Wooten retired, and he handed the clipboard over to Mike Jones, who is still the coach there. I believe Mike Jones is going into his 18th or 19th season. And Mike Jones played at DeMatha for Coach Wooten. After he played a little bit professionally after college, he came back and was the freshman coach, was an assistant. So Coach Jones is really a DeMatha lifer. And that's another thing that I believe makes it special. You take this 50-year legacy, and then you now hand the reins over to someone that's basically spent most of his life, outside of the 4 years he was at college, at DeMatha. He has such a strong respect and appreciation for the school as a whole, as well as the basketball program. And I don't know that you could find a finer coach in any sport at any level than Mike Jones. He gets it. I mean, he understands certainly the on-the-court tactical side. His X's and O's and drills are second to none. But what he does such a brilliant job of is creating cohesion and inclusiveness. And he's really a player's coach. He has such a great relationship, and he truly cares about the young men that play for him. And one of the things that makes him so special is he cares about them as a human being first and as a basketball player second. I see players that played for Coach Jones, 10 years ago, and they played a small role on the team. They were like the 12th man 10 years ago, and they still come back and to say hi to Coach Jones and to be around the program. And that just speaks volumes of, the type of coach he is. So that's where I think it starts with the uniqueness. And then, of course, DeMatha's had some really talented players come through, and Coach Jones has done a great job of taking good players and making them great players, and taking great players and making them, exceptional players. And he does a good job of getting everyone to buy into their role and embracing their role and starring in their role so that the team can be the best that they're capable of. And, you take that and combine that with, his competitiveness to play a very national schedule. Any opportunity he gets to play a top 10 team in the country, he wants to play them. And then, of course, the conference that DeMatha plays in is a very elite conference already. So, they've got a very packed schedule. He runs tremendous practices. His practices are incredibly detailed and organized. Every practice that he holds has some type of competitive element, has some type of fundamental element. So you're working on the actual skills of the game. And then he does a lot of time and score and situation type stuff. So every practice I've ever seen has always had those three characteristics. So I know that was kind of a mouthful and it was a little bit all over the place, but if you take all of that together, that's why DeMatha and Mike Jones are so special and so unique.
Had to be an incredible experience for you. And I'm going to ask you one more question before I pass it off to our buddy Nate Kangney. But you've been an advocate of the motto, be better than yesterday. And it's something you've been pushing for a long time. It's something that we instilled into our basketball program. How can we make sure everyone in our program is trying to be better than yesterday, especially at a tough time like this?
Well, it all starts with mindset. I mean, really, whether or not you're better than you are yesterday is kind of irrelevant. What's most important is that you have the desire to be better, and you're working to be better, and you have a mindset of constantly trying to improve. No matter who's listening to this right now, whether you're a player or a coach or a parent or a fan, it doesn't really matter where you are at the moment. What's way more important than where you are is the direction at which you're headed. Is your arrow pointing up because you're constantly progressing, or is your arrow pointing down because you're regressing? So, wherever you are, just make sure that you're taking steps, and you have to be very intentional and purposeful about taking steps to continually move forward. And, as a basketball player, there's so many areas where you can look to improve on a daily basis. One is your body. Are you taking care of your body? That starts with the food that you eat. That starts with how much sleep you get. Certainly that goes into your workouts and your strength and conditioning and your fitness. But then are you also taking steps to improve your skills? Are you working on the major skill sets of the game? Shooting, passing, rebounding, ball handling, defending. And are you working on them in a game-like manner and in a manner that's in alignment with the role that you'll play on your team in the upcoming season. Then as we continue to go up, are you working on your basketball IQ? Are you watching film of yourself? Are you watching film of opponents? Are you watching film of great players in the college and NBA? But instead of watching them as a fan, are you actually studying them as a student of the game? And if you're constantly paying attention to those different areas, there's really no reason why you can't get just a little bit better in one of those areas every single day. And while, yes, during this current pandemic, where basically everyone's on house arrest, I realize that can make that much more difficult. Not every player has access to a ball and a hoop where they can go play every day and practice proper social distancing. Not every player has access to certain film that they can watch and break down. Not every player has access to, some dumbbells or a Vertimax, but you don't need to. You can still find ways to improve. I'm a big believer in the mantra of do what you can with what you have where you are. Don't make excuses. Don't blame anyone or anything, and don't complain. Just do the best you can with what you have where you are. If you don't have access to a hoop right now, well, can you work on your handle? Do you have a ball and you can dribble it in your basement or out in your front yard? If you don't have access to your game footage from this past season, well, you can certainly YouTube certain players, in college and the NBA and watch some of the things they do, especially the way they move without the ball or some of the ways that they talk on defense. So if you don't have access to a ton of equipment, I'm sure you can find some space to do some push-ups or some lunges or some wall sits, or, if you have a playground that, again, it's safe to go to, you can do some pull-ups. Just do the best you can with what you have where you are, and you can still make progress even at a time like this. And that's what I hope everyone's doing. At the time of this recording, we don't really know where the finish line is. We don't know when we're going to get back to some sense of normalcy. So really all we have is a day-by-day approach. And if you can make sure that every night when you go to sleep, you put your head on your pillow knowing I did something today to get a little bit better at my craft, then over time that will start to add up. And then whenever you can get back to normal, you can get back in the gym and in the weight room and in the film room, you'll have created that ramp, which is constantly going up, and then you'll have some momentum to move forward.
Thank you, Alan. This is stuff that we can pass on to our players, everybody that's on here. I'm going to pass this over to another co-founder, Nate Kangany.
Hey, Alan. I'm Nate Kangany. I'm the head coach at Whiteland High School in Whiteland, Indiana, and one of the co-founders. We're excited to have you. My first question for you today. So I've read where when you walk away from a speaking engagement, you want the audience to feel empowered. So from a coach's perspective, as we're trying to build player-led teams, how can we empower our players to take an active leadership role for our team?
Well, it starts with caring. When I step off stage, I want the audience to know that I cared enough to prepare for them, that I cared enough to bring my best self, that I cared enough to do my homework and my due diligence to give them a very customized presentation. I want them to know that I care about their success. And I speak to a variety of different audiences, but the industry is irrelevant. I just want the audience to know that I care. And I think it's the exact same thing in coaching. First and foremost, you have to create connections and relationships so that your players know that you care about them. As I mentioned earlier about Coach Jones, what I think he does a terrific job of is making sure his players know he cares about them as people first and as players second. That if for any reason they stopped playing basketball or couldn't play basketball, they got injured or anything like that, that he would still have their back and he would still believe in them and he would still do everything he can to help them move forward and have an increasingly better life. And that's what's ultimately most important. In order for you to empower your players, they have to know you love them. And if love is not a word you're comfortable with, feel free to substitute whatever else you like to use. But, I think your players should know how much you care about them and their dreams and their goals and their success. And, this is a perfect time to deepen that connection because everyone's struggling right now. Players are struggling because they're not able to play the game that they love. Coaches are struggling because we're not in the gym with the whistle working with kids, which was what lights all of us up because we love to coach. Games aren't being played, practices aren't being held. We can't watch games on TV because for the same reasons. So, having that empathy and compassion in these tough times is actually a great opportunity to strengthen those connections. Another thing that's incredibly important about empowerment is giving them some autonomy. Once again, when I step off stage, that audience knows, look, I gave you kind of a blueprint and I gave you some strategies and some principles, but now I'm going to get on a plane and fly back home. If you want your life to change, then you're the one that actually has to do this stuff. Like, I can only do so much. I can be your tour guide and I can kind of be the conductor of the orchestra, but you've got to be the one to play the instrument. And I make that very clear in my talks that all I can do are provide strategies, but if you don't do this stuff, then nothing in your life is going to change. And it's the same thing from coach to player. You all can teach skills and you can show drills and you can teach principles, but ultimately it's up to the player to want to become the best that they can be. And they need that, certainly encouragement and inspiration from you, but they need to be the one that does that. So giving them some autonomy, to have some ownership over what they do and when they do it, being able to, hold them accountable to a high standard. I think holding someone accountable is one of the best gifts that you can give them. So when you notice a player that's not progressing at the rate you believe they should be, to call them out on that or to ask them why or what's the holdup. Many times as coaches, that's when we'll hear that trilogy that I mentioned earlier. We'll hear them make an excuse about something, or we'll hear them complain about something, or we'll hear them blame someone else or something for the reason that they're not getting better. And part of showing someone that you care about them is not letting them get away with those things. Don't let them make excuses. Don't let them blame anyone, and don't let them complain. Hold them to the fire of being the best that they can be. And I think, once again, when you kind of put all of those things together, then you're doing what you can to empower them and give them opportunities. You're holding them accountable. And this stuff needs to be done both on and off the court. The stuff that applies to improving the skill sets of the game are the same stuff that applies to making sure your players are better leaders, better communicators, and better teammates.
That's great. So I had prepared several questions for you, and with that one question there, you had kind of hit on a couple different things. That's awesome. But to kind of follow up, and maybe you can use stories from players that you've worked with or whatever, but maybe what's one or two specific examples of things that you think are great when building that player-coach relationship, that, showing you care, showing that love, any stories of kind of unique connections that were built, or really any direction you want to go in, but just elaborate on some ways where we can strengthen that relationship.
For sure. Well, one, as the head coach, it is your job to protect the sanctity of the locker room, the sanctity of the gym. You have to do what is best for the program first. That needs to be number one. And then as you come down from that, then you need to do what's best for the team. And then when you come down for that, you do what's best for each individual player. As coaches, we are servant leaders, and it is our job to do everything we can to help our young people develop on and off the court. But we can't do things specifically for one that's going to undermine the team or is going to undermine the program. So we have to make sure that we understand kind of that rite of passage and that hierarchy. But once we get down to the player level, every decision we make and everything we do should be for their improvement. And of course we want to win games, no question. That's why, that's not why we coach, but we coach and we're competitive and we want to win. And anyone that says losing is just as much as fun as winning is either lying or they're stupid, because winning is a lot more fun. However, there's a process to winning, and a big portion of that process starts with the relationship that you create with each player, the development of each player, and then how you can bring everyone together to create a cohesive unit so that they all work together. And, some of the relationship mantras that I learned very early in my career, the first we've kind of been talking about already. Coaching 101 is the mindset of, it's not about me, it's about you. I'm coach talking to player. Everything I'm going to do is going to be to pour into you and make you the best player you can be. And I'm going to also do that for your 14 teammates so that we can be the best team that we can be. And if we can replicate that year after year of being the best we're capable of, now we'll have a program, worthy of attention. And this has nothing to do with whether or not you win or lose. I know winning is more fun, and I know winning is important, but you can have a winner's culture and a winning mindset and a winning mentality. And sometimes you still end up 500 at the end of the season, but that doesn't mean that you don't have a winning program. So it's really not defined by the outcome. It's more of the process at which we put into it. So that first mantra is, it's not about me, it's about you. The second mantra, and I think this might be the most important, is you have to learn to connect first and then coach second. So this connection that you mentioned is so important, because the only way you can coach a young person to the best of their ability is if they trust you, is if they respect you, is if they have full buy-in and believe in. And those are things that we as coaches need to earn. And we earn those by creating a connection, by serving the player, and so that they know how much we care about them. That they know that their hopes and dreams and goals are you're in there right there with them, trying to help them, accomplish those things. So that's the second mantra, is connect first, coach second. And then the third one speaks to really the culture of everything that you do. And that is, there's really only two things you should do as a coach. You either accept it or you correct it. And it doesn't matter if you're talking about footwork during a shooting drill or the way someone behaves, in the cafeteria during lunch. Everything a player does, you can put into one of two buckets. This is something that I accept and I want to see more of, because it's in alignment with the player that I want you to be, with the team I want us to be, and with the values and standards of this program. And when someone does something that you accept, then you need to praise it, because that which gets praised gets repeated. Then on the other end, if someone does something that's not in alignment, their footwork is incorrect, or they misbehave or do something that is not in alignment with the player you want them to be, the team you're trying to create in the program you have, then you have to correct that. And this comes down to discipline and accountability and making sure that you hold everyone to a very, very high standard. So there is no other option. As coaches, we accept it or we correct it, which is why I also mentioned earlier, about no complaining. Complaining is not a third option. I almost find it laughable when a coach says, my team takes bad shots. Well, yeah, because you allow your team to take bad shots. A team that takes bad shots is way more of a reflection of the coach than it is of the players. When you're dealing with teenagers, of course they're going to take bad shots. They don't have very high basketball IQs yet. They don't know as much about the game yet. So whether or not your team consistently takes good or bad shots is a reflection of you and how much you accept or correct the shots that have been taken.
That was great. My next question was going to be about, holding players to higher standards and what you thought there. So you pretty much answered that. So I'm going to send it back over to Jeremy, and we'll keep this going, but I appreciate you being with us.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
I'm sorry, before I ask my question, I'll encourage any participants here to use that, participants and raise their hand if they have one themselves, and I'll let Alan get to this one, and then any ones that I see that want to ask. But Alan, recently there's been some disconnect, just looking on Twitter, about the idea of positivity. So obviously John Gordon is huge in the power of positivity, but then there might be some contrarians that say being too positive can ignore the issues or the situation at hand. So I'm just curious, kind of what's your take on that?
Every single word in our vernacular has a connotation, and a connotation is really the emotion that you connect to a word. So I don't think any word in and of itself is either good or bad. I think it's all on how we internalize it. I don't think any concept or the definition of a word is good or bad. It's how we internalize it. I tend to be in the John Gordon camp of believing positivity is important. Positivity is infectious. And if given a choice, I would prefer to look at something in a positive light than in a negative light. I actually think that will help performance and help moving forward. I don't connotate positivity as meaning that you're tone deaf or that you're not paying attention to reality or that your head is in the sand. Once again, I'm in John Gordon's camp of believing that that's actually a good trait to have. But the reason I bring up connotations is, to some people, they hear the word positivity and to them that's kind of phony or being fake happy. And that's just how they internalize it. And I don't believe in being phony, and I don't believe in being fake happy. So if that's how you define the word positivity, then it's simply it's a different discussion. But, we take the current pandemic that we're in right now, and I know that at some point this will be over, but I do believe that the lessons that we can learn right now are going to have very high utility and can be applied to a variety of different things moving forward. So even if we're talking about something that might be only this one point in time, COVID-19, it's still important for us to listen and to process, because we can use these things moving forward. And the reason I bring that up is, the negative results of COVID-19 are obvious. I mean, on one end, you have people losing their lives and you have people getting really sick. You have people losing jobs and being furloughed. You have people going bankrupt and going out of business. You keep working that way down. You have athletes who have had their, spring seasons canceled. You have people that aren't able to practice or work out or do the things that they truly love to do. You have people that were supposed to graduate in May and they're not going to have a proper graduation. You have people that were supposed to get married and aren't getting married. So there's a lot of very obvious negatives, but that doesn't mean that there aren't also some positive things for us to address and to embrace and to even focus on. Depending on what area of life you're talking about, I can rattle off several positives that are occurring right now. And just because I can bring up that there are some positives and I can choose to focus on the positives, that doesn't mean that I'm ignoring the negatives. That doesn't mean that I'm not aware of everything that I just said. It's just a matter of where I choose to put my attention. And I do believe you can have both. I consider myself a positive person, but I also consider myself incredibly down to earth and realistic. I know what's going on in the world and I choose to have a positive mindset about it. I also consider myself optimistic. I don't believe I'm naive in any way, shape, or form, but I'm optimistic that there will be some really good things that come out of this. There's something incredibly positive about the fact that all of us are given a chance to kind of take a pause and take a beat and hit the reset button and really self-explore the things that we've been doing on a regular basis and evaluate whether or not those things are good or bad and how do we want to change moving forward. Every single person listening to this has an opportunity to emerge from this coronavirus as either a better version of yourself or a worse version of yourself. And while there's many things that are handcuffing our abilities to do normal things or things that were normal, those can't be excuses. Every single person, your mindset, your physical, mental, and emotional fitness, all of that stuff, you can make sure is going up despite this pandemic. And to me, that's what having a positive mindset is all about. So it's not about being naive. It's not about not acknowledging that there are negative things going on. It's just a lens at which you choose to look through. And I'll always choose to look through a positive lens.
Absolutely. I love it. Coach Prokop, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, so Coach Prokop here from Valparaiso High School, freshman coach, head coach, but I work with the varsity program as well. Obviously, I'm always looking for ways to continue to learn the game as a coach and get better, and I think that's what we're all here to do. But someone that, this is only my second year, I just finished up as a head coach. What are the best advice you can give someone looking to improve as a coach, just as a person as well?
The foundation would be very similar to some of the stuff that I've been sharing before. Focus more on, initially, your emotional intelligence and your ability to create deep connections with your players. If you can do that first, that will make everything else easier. If you spend all of your time, and I know lots of new and young coaches that do this, if you're so worried about learning new drills or X's and O's or what's the best baseline and out of bounds play, well, if you don't have players that are fully bought in and fully believe in and that don't trust and respect you, then those things become irrelevant. So once again, there's almost this hierarchy of what needs to be focused on. And I think as a coach, working on our own self-awareness, our own emotional intelligence, our ability to connect and pour into our players is first, as we continue to work on that. And that's something that all of us should be working on for the rest of our careers. This is not something like, oh yeah, I spent 2 years working on my self-awareness and emotional intelligence. That's done. Now I can move on to some X's and O's. No, it's a constant evolution. But once you kind of have that foundation, then you need to start developing your coaching philosophy and your convictions. What do you believe as far as the game of basketball? Now, if you are the freshman coach, I would imagine that many of your on the court convictions and principles and belief systems need to be in alignment with the JV and varsity team. I mean, if you look at a hierarchy, while you do have your own team with your own players, you're part of a subset of the varsity team. So I would recommend that you're constantly, sitting down with the head varsity coach and the JV coach, and you guys make sure that you're on the same page when it comes to terminology, when it comes to standards, when it comes to the way that you do things, because part of your job as the freshman coach is to prepare your players so that they can matriculate up to JV and varsity, and that the acclimation is seamless. If everything you're doing, if all of the sets and the defenses and the terminology you're using is different, then you're actually putting your players at a disadvantage, because now when they go up, they're going to have to learn an entirely new system, and that's not fair to them. That would be an example of being more worried about yourself as opposed to being worried about the program as a whole. And obviously not implying that you're doing any of that, just want to make sure that I'm kind of covering all bases. But start developing your convictions as a coach. Like, what do you believe? How do you believe the game should be played? What do you think a practice should consist of? I mentioned that Coach Jones, in every practice, no matter what's on the practice plan, there will be something that's of a competitive nature. There'll be something that includes actual fundamentals of the game, and there'll be something that includes time and score to prepare players. And every practice, even if it's a 30-minute walkthrough, is going to include those three things. Well, that's a belief system that he has. So you as a young coach and a new coach need to start developing that belief system and those convictions. One of the things I love about the game of basketball is, if we just use the NCAA men's college is kind of an example. You can have a team like Kentucky that always plays a very fast-paced game, and then you can have an equally successful program like University of Virginia, who takes a much more slower and much more methodical, let's limit the number of possessions approach, and both of those systems work. I mean, clearly, both of those systems, have major advantages if done correctly, and they're not very wishy-washy. Those guys play the way that they believe it's best to play the game of basketball. And that's what I would say is work on developing your coaching philosophy and convictions. And you do that by learning from other coaches, exposing yourself to as many different people and things as you can. And then over time, you'll slowly whittle that down until you have your beliefs.
Coach Hayworth, would you like to ask yours?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks, Alan, for being here. I appreciate it. Luke Hayworth from North Putnam High School, girls varsity coach. One question I had is, both at the high school level, it seems like everything off the court requires so much flexibility, especially at a school my size with multi-sport athletes. And then on the court, we hear the phrase a lot these days, we want to teach players how to play, not just what plays to run. But at the same time, you just make a comment about we either are allowing it or correcting it. And so how do we balance that ability to teach kids how to make reads, make decisions, and not be afraid to make mistakes between an overcoaching and being very matter of fact about every step of the process as well?
Well, it's a combination of autonomy and accountability. I'm a huge advocate of free play, and I don't mean free play as in your practice is simply you rolling out the balls and letting the kids do whatever they want. But I'm a big believer that if all you do are very rigid and specific drills, especially if those drills don't have very much transfer or crossover to actual game situations, then you're really not preparing your players to play the game. I'm a big fan of 1-on-1 and 2-on-2 and 3-on-3 and different scenarios. So it doesn't have to just be 5-on-5 scrimmaging, but it's about you sharing the principles that you believe in. So, hey, here's how I believe the game should be played. And let's just say, for example, kind of like a motion offense type thought where, I believe as a basketball principle that after you pass the ball, you should only be doing a couple of things. You either make a hard basket cut or you go screen for a teammate. Like, if that's what you believe as a coach, then that needs to be constantly reinforced to your players, and it needs to be either accepted or corrected as often as possible. So in any scenario, whether it's a drill or a 3-on-3 or a live scrimmage or even a game, when a player makes a pass and then makes a hard basket cut or screens away, you praise it. Call them by name and tell them what they did really well, so that you're conditioning them to continue to do the things that you want to see them do. When they don't, when they pass the ball and then just stand there, then we need to correct that and we need to bring that up. And there'll be a curve to that. You know, initially when you have younger players that are new to you and new to your system and don't know how to play, you're going to be doing a lot more correcting than you are praising. And that's just part of the learning curve. But if you have a group of veterans, you know, you've got mostly seniors and they've been with you for a couple years, my guess is it'll skew in the other direction. Most of what you're saying is praise. You know, great cut, great screen. Hey, make sure you thank her for the screen. She got you wide open for that shot. So it's a little bit of both. But giving the players the autonomy to just continue to play. So it doesn't mean that you have to stop the action every single time. I think that's one of the mistakes that coaches make during this free play where we're scrimmaging in different scenarios. They stop every 2 seconds to make a correction. You don't need to do that. You know, if Sally stands there after she makes the pass, you don't have to stop everything and blow the whistle and have a sermon. You can just say, Sally, don't forget to cut or screen away or whatever your terminology may be. So try to keep things free flowing. One other thing that I think is incredibly helpful is, as a coach, instead of when you do stop play, instead of always telling them what they did wrong or what they should have done, just start asking questions. You know, let's just say you're doing a 5-on-5 and a player comes down and passes the ball and it gets stolen. Okay, everybody stop. And then you can address the young lady. Jenna, can you explain to me what you saw and why you made that pass? You know, first of all, have enough faith in your player that you believe she tried to make what she thought was the correct pass with the information she had at that time. Now, if she's not a very good player and has a very limited basketball IQ, then it might be obvious to everyone in the world that that was a really dumb pass. But she didn't intentionally make a dumb pass. There's no kid in the world that intentionally turns the ball over, especially when their coach is watching. So at least give her credit for trying to do what she thought was correct. And then just simply ask, like, why did you think that was the right pass to make? And then just be quiet and let her answer. Let her take some ownership over the decision she made. See what her thought process is. See why she explains that. And then say, okay, well, I appreciate you sharing. Clearly that wasn't the right pass because it got stolen. If we could rewind the tape here and you could do it again, what might have been a better option for you to make? What might have been a better pass? And let the kids start figuring it out. Let them start coaching themselves and articulating what would have been the right play to make, because that'll make it stickier. You know, if every time you stop practice and tell them what they should have done, that goes back to you're starting to condition them to be robots. When you stop practice and you hold them accountable and ask them what they saw and then ask them what they would do different, now it becomes stickier. And I think you'll start to see much more of an improvement. So I know that was a very long-winded answer and I threw a lot at you. I guess the short version is there is no right way or one way to do it. That's why coaching is both an art and a science. You have to get a feel for your players. And even with everything I just described, it won't be the same for every single player. You will have some players that you need to coddle a little bit more than others. You'll have some players that you can be much more stern and direct with than others. You'll have some players that have earned so much credit that, you know, they can take a bad shot or two here and there, and you know that they know it was a bad shot, so you don't even have to take them out of the game because they won't make that same mistake again. Whereas you have some other players, they're just going to keep jacking up bad shots until you yank them out of the game. That's the only way they'll learn. So we don't coach everyone the same. We treat everyone in our program fairly, but we definitely don't treat everyone the same because every single player and every single young person has different needs. So that was a tsunami of an answer, but if you kind of take all of that together, hopefully it gave you some semblance of an answer.
Coach Dolan, you're up.
Thank you. First off, Jeremy, thanks for having me. This is outstanding. I'm up here at Weymouth High School just outside of Boston. Alan, thanks for sharing your time with us. I've been a follower for many years. I can remember looking in my email inbox for the Stronger Team emails you used to send out. And one of the things I always liked was your list of traits of whether it was great players, great coaches, and even the energy giver, energy taker. If you could just elaborate on that kind of stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Well, no, I appreciate your loyalty. You have been around for a while if those were Stronger Team emails you were getting.
You know it.
Yes, no, that's fantastic. You know, one of the things, and I do this actually with the corporate groups that I work with now, you know, one of the taglines that I stole from my good friend and mentor, Jay Billis, is be the type of teammate that you want to play with. And I always like the way that he framed that. And, you know, I think we can extrapolate that to what you all do is be the type of coach that you would want to play for, or be the type of coach that you'd want to coach your own child if you have children. And I think that mindset is really important. And it's an exercise that I do at the corporate level because I tell them, hey, you might not use the word teammate. You guys might say coworker or colleague, but they all mean the same thing. So what I do is I have them generate a list of the traits of the best teammates that they've ever had. And I say, look, this could be someone that you currently work with in marketing, or this could be someone you played Little League with 30 years ago. But I want you to come up with a list of the traits of the best teammates. And, you know, they come up with the list that the same list we'd all come up with right now. You know, I want someone that's supportive. I want someone that's accountable. I want someone that gives a great effort. I want, you know, and they'd come up with this list. And then I say, okay, here's the list of what you believe makes a great teammate. Now do that list. Like, be that person. If this is the list of what you think everyone else should be doing, then it needs to start with you. You need to do those things. If you think the person on your right or left should be accountable, then you need to be accountable. If you think the person in front of you and behind you should be enthusiastic, then you should be enthusiastic. And I would say the same thing for coaching. You know, you guys can come up with your own Mount Rushmore of coaches, whoever that may be at any level. And then don't talk about offense and defense or wins and losses, but list the traits of those coaches that you find most admirable. What is it about them that you admire most outside of the X's and O's, the wins and the losses, and come up with that list? And more than likely, those are things you can and should be doing right now. You know, if you follow my work, you know, I'm a diehard Coach K fan. You know, I've been drinking the Duke Kool-Aid for a long time and really admire and respect and appreciate Coach K. And if I came up with a list of the 10 reasons that I like Coach K, I guarantee you all 10 of those things are things that I can aspire to emulate. Now, I'm not trying to be Coach K. I'm not trying to replicate him. I don't want to be a Coach K robot, but I can emulate the things that he does. You know, his practices are very organized. Well, I like that. Well, if I was a coach at present and I was holding a practice, you better believe I would make sure my practices are very organized. You know, so come up with these lists, and these are things that players can generate as well. You know, ask your players, you know, what do you think are 5 habits of a great shooter? Like, what do you think great shooters do? You know, during the unseen hours, list 5 things that you think they do, and the kids will come up with a great list. Might even be a better list than we'd come up with. And then say, okay, well, if you want to be a great shooter, then do those things. You know, people tend to make things so much more complicated than they really are, you know, and I think that these lists are a great way because they're very visual, they're very visceral, and lists are things that, you know, numbers are things that we're all kind of unconsciously attracted to. And just say that, you know, and you could do that for anything, whether it's being a good shooter. You know, what are the traits of the best defenders? You know, hey guys, who do you think are the 3 best defensive players in the NBA? You know, and let them vote for their NBA players and say, okay, well, name 5 reasons that those guys are great defenders. All right, well, they communicate. They're always in a low stance. Man, they're in tip-top physical shape. You know, and they list those things and then say, okay, we'll go do those. You know, and unless one of the things they listed was, hey, the guy's 7 foot and he has an 8-foot wingspan. All right, well, there's nothing we can do about that one. Let's move down to item number 2. But certainly you can do everything else that's on that list. So if you want to be a great defender, do those things. So I think those lists can be very, very valuable in a variety of different capacities.
Coach Brasher.
Appreciate you having us. Thanks for being today, Alan. I love all your stuff, listen a lot to your stuff, and read your book. Going back in your day when you did the podcast with Adam Bradley, obviously he's really big into leadership with the Lead 'em Up. If you had to pick one characteristic for an emerging leader to have that you think is very important, which one would you pick, and how would you go about making sure that they are able to do that effectively?
You know, this is kind of like asking me which of my 3 children do I love the most. You know, it's really hard to narrow it down to one. You know, as a leader, I think we can whittle the list down to a couple, but I don't know that I can go on record with just one. One that's definitely in the ballpark I've mentioned earlier, and I've mentioned it several times, I need a leader that cares. I need a leader that cares about the mission. I need a leader that cares about their people. I need a leader that cares enough about themselves to be the best version of themselves as often and as consistently as possible, so that the care factor has to be there. Another huge one for me is, I want a leader that has humility. Certainly I want someone that's confident in their ability, confident in their preparation, confident that they're going to help lead you to the promised land. But I want a leader with humility, someone that's not afraid to be vulnerable, someone that's open to admit when maybe they made a lapse in judgment or chose something incorrectly or didn't come as their best self that day. I think humility is an endearing quality that improves connection. So when you have someone that truly cares and you have someone that's very humble, that starts to improve your ability to create all of these different connections. And another one is you just need to have a leader with a vision, a vision of what they believe this team should be, or this program should be, or this company should be. They have this vision, and this vision is going to come with a set of standards. These are the standards of excellence. And if we all live up to these standards on a very consistent basis, then we will become that team or that company or that program. So I would say let's go with vision, humility, and the care factor as a three-way tie for first place.
Coach Howington?
Yeah, Alan, this is phenomenal. Kind of going back into the archives, like Coach Dolan, read an article called "Do You Deserve Success?" And you talk about the difference between the want to and the deserve to. Would you mind sharing a little bit more about this?
Oh, absolutely. It kind of makes up the foundational principle of my parenting philosophy. My sons now, the born backcourt, are 10 years old, and my daughter will be turning 8 coming up here in June. And I talk to them all the time about the difference between want to and deserve to. And really, most people have the want to. I mean, that's the easy part. I want to be a good player. I want us to win a lot of games. I want this, I want that. And there's nothing wrong with the want to. That's where the seed actually starts. But then the major question is, do you deserve to? And that's what I want to make sure that folks understand. There's this old adage, and it's been around since I was a child, hey, Alan, you can be anything you want to be. Well, that's not necessarily true. But I can be anything that I deserve to be. And underneath that deserve is kind of the ability to earn something. So another way of saying that is, you can be anything or have anything that you earn. Now, I know that there are so many factors outside of our control. So I'm not even implying that just because you deserve something that you will get it or you will attain it. I mean, I think we could all rattle off a list of players that probably deserve to get a college scholarship or deserve to play in the NBA, and it never quite came to fruition. But that was not through any fault of their own. They did everything possible to deserve that. It just wasn't in the cards, and it didn't happen. But the key to the deserve mindset is it puts all of the responsibility and accountability on the person and not on anything else. So if you want something bad enough, then you will have the process and the systems, and you'll have the work habits to deserve to have that. And that's what I want to make sure my children understand. I want them to dream big. I want them to have very lofty aspirations, but way more important than that, I want them to have the work ethic and the attitude and the systems and strategies and habits in place to deserve whatever that thing may be. And I try not to talk a lot about outcomes with my children. I talk so much more about the process, and even now at their young ages while they're playing youth sports, and this could be an entirely separate Zoom call if you want to talk about my thoughts on youth sports and especially the parental involvement of youth sports. But just tell my kid, I don't care if you guys win or lose. I don't care how many points you score. I care that you have fun. I care that you listen to your coaches. I care that you're a good teammate, and I care that you do the best that you can. You guys stick to those 4 things, and I will always continue to pay for, drive you to, and support anything that you want to do. And the reason I bring those 4 things up is I believe that if you do those 4 things, you will deserve to be the best player that you can be. If every practice, every workout, and every game, you have fun, you work hard, you listen to your coaches, and you're a good teammate. If you do those 4 things, then you will deserve to go as far as this game will take you. And that's what I focus on. I don't focus on anything else. So yeah, everybody wants stuff. Not near as many people earn it or deserve it.
We'll go with Coach Kangany, and then I'll bring us home with the final 2 questions.
I love it.
All right, Coach. So you've talked about performance gap and the difference between what we know and what we do. So as coaches, how can we shrink that performance gap for our players and help them transfer what we're doing in our preparation, our practices, our pregame to how they perform in game?
So with the performance gap, as you just pointed out perfectly, it is the gap between what we know and what we do. And that is a major key to improving performance. So some of it will come down to the accountability factor. You know, it's making sure that they're aware of the fact. Self-awareness is key. Aware of the fact that, let's just use taking a bad shot, for example. You know, Jack shoots a shot in practice that's not a shot that we want Jack to take. So we need to make sure, first of all, he's aware that that was a bad shot, because if he's not even aware of it, he's going to continue to take it. So first we need to make sure that he knows it was a bad shot. And I believe the best way to get that to be sticky and memorable is to ask him, was that a good shot? And hopefully he has the humility and openness and coachability to say no. But then the next question is, well, why was that a bad shot? And then hopefully he'll say, well, you know, Sammy was more open than I was, so I took a good shot when my teammate could have had a great shot. Or, hey, this is 3 or 4 feet outside of my range, probably shouldn't have taken that. Or based on time and score, I really didn't need to jack up a contested 15-footer. But give some ownership, because the more that they can own the knowing part, the closer we'll get to being able to close that gap to the doing part. But as far as actually closing the gap, you know, that's something that what I just explained would be something that we cover on a very regular basis. Every single day in practice, let's look at that. And my good friend, Grant Leonard, who's the assistant coach at Queens in Charlotte, one of the best Division II college programs in the country. I mean, they do a phenomenal job. You know, I love the terminology they use, and I know this is going off on a little bit of a tangent, but hopefully you find it helpful, is they don't really say good and bad shots. Basically what they do is they outline for every single player what shots they want them to take in games. And of course, every player's map's going to be a little bit different. So some players, you know, we've got color coded, you know, you've got the map of the court, and they're kind of color coded, where in these little areas here are where you take high percentage shots. Those are the shots that we want you to take. So therefore, when we practice and in workouts, when we do shooting drills, that's where you're going to be shooting from. You know, basketball is not an equal opportunity sport. You know, I know lots of coaches do shooting drills where they say, okay, shoot 10 from the corner, and then 10 from the wing, and then 10 from the top, and then 10 from the other wing, and then 10 from the corner for your 50 shots. Well, if you have a player that is, in the entire season, is not going to take a single shot from the corner based on your offense and their position, well, that means 40% of the shots they just practice are shots they're never going to shoot in a game. So that's incredibly inefficient. That's a colossal waste of time for you and for the player. So instead, when we break up to do shooting drills, you know, Sammy knows these are where he needs to shoot from, and Jack knows this is where he needs to shoot from. So the kids get conditioned to only practicing the shots that they're supposed to take. And once again, this map can be all over the place. You know, if you have a kid that is not a very good shooter, the colors on their map are going to be very small and probably pretty close to the basket. If you have a player that's more like a Steph Curry, I mean, almost the entire map is open, because any shot they take is going to be a pretty good shot. So again, it's not equal opportunity. But the reason I bring this up is at Queens, when a player takes what we would all call a bad shot, that's not what they say. What they say is, all right, stop, Jack, is that a shot that you practice? It's a yes or no. No, coach. Okay, well, if it's not a shot that you practice, then please don't take that shot now. And it's it. End of discussion. And if it is a shot that they practice, then it's a good shot for them to take. And if you're telling them that this is a good shot for you to take, and you're going to practice taking these shots, then you have to be okay with them taking those in games, even if they're cold or even if they're missing them. Because a good shot is a good shot the moment it's taken. It has nothing to do with whether or not it goes in. As you guys know, players can miss great shots and they can make awful shots, and we want to reward the previous. We want to reward them taking good shots. So as far as closing that gap, it's about this constant acknowledgement of what they already know and us reinforcing that over and over again until they're doing what they know they're supposed to do. And many times the best way is to simply ask them, like, was that the right pass to make? No, coach. Well, why wasn't it the right pass to make? Because I didn't have a good angle to feed the post, or I should have kicked it out to the corner for a 3, and get them to own it. And that will slowly over time, with proper repetition and conditioning, close that gap.
Alan, you're a big proponent of being the best at the basics, kind of culminating into that Kobe story. What would you consider the basics of either leadership in general or coaching? But I want to take caring off the table. I think you've talked about that, to some extent. Maybe self-awareness. We know that's obviously tremendously important, but for coaching, maybe specifically, what would be some of the basics?
I would say the number one is the ability to listen. The ability to listen to your players, listen to your assistant coaches and other coaches, listen to yourself and your own intuition. I know that is kind of self-awareness, so I guess I'm kind of cheating. But you're basically asking me to shoot and not use my arms, so that's making this really tough. No, I think listening is vital. Listening for several different reasons is vital. One, it's going to make sure that you're open to having all of the information that you can. It also gives you tremendous insight into what that person is thinking. That's why I think I think coaches should be asking their players way more questions. And again, we're not asking them, what color should our uniforms be, or who do you think should the starting 5 be tonight? We're asking questions that are going to reveal their basketball IQ, or going to reveal, what they saw. Because you have to realize too, what we see on the sideline as coaches is not the exact same thing that the players see when they're actually in the heat of battle. We have to understand that we're a little bit removed from that. And one of the ways that we confirm that is anytime you have a player that's injured and has to sit out for a series of games and all they can do is watch, they usually say something to the effect of like, man, the game looks so different from over here than when you're actually on the court. And I think the more we can be open to other people's perspectives on that, the better off it is. And even though you forbid me from talking about caring, listening also shows the other person that you care about them, you care about their opinion, you care about their thoughts. Sorry, my light just died because I've been doing so many of these calls. So that's vital. The listening is a huge component. I'll even take it one step further, and I hope you guys find this is a helpful exercise to do with your teams. If you have been following my work for a while, you've probably heard this and already used this, but one way you can listen is by doing some different polls with your team. And I know at present we can't get everybody in the same room physically, but these things could still be done virtually, or you could wait till you get the team together. And you basically, let's just imagine we're sitting in a classroom. We've got, I'm the head coach. I got 2 assistants next to me, and I've got 15 players sitting in front of me. And I pass out a series of index cards, blank index cards, and give everybody a pen. And I'm going to ask a series of questions. And all I want you to do is write the first name of the player on the card and then pass it forward. And these will be completely anonymous. So you don't write your name. You just write the name of the player. And every time we pass them forward, we'll put a rubber band around them and we'll put a Post-it note on it that describes the question that was asked, so that everything stays very organized. And you can ask a series of questions where you really want the player's input. And I'll give you a few examples, but none of these are right or wrong. This is a matter of you guys deciding on the questions. The first question: who is the hardest worker on this team? That's it. I'm not going to load it. I'm not trying to lead the witness. Who do you think is the hardest worker on this team? Inevitably, a kid will raise their hand. Hey, coach, can we put ourselves? Yeah, if you think you're the hardest worker on the team, sure, put yourself. And then collect those. And then, okay, who's the most talented player on our team? Same thing. And because I do skew towards the positive, as we've already covered, I would say 70% of the superlatives I'd ask for would be on the positive. But it's really important to ask some on the other side as well. Who do you guys think is the most selfish person on our team? Well, what does selfish mean, coach? Who do you think cares more about themselves and their stats than they do about us as a program? Okay. Who do you think's the least hardworking person on this team? Who do you, and start, and if you collect 5 or 6 of these different samples, then you can start to look for some trends. And if you're smart, you can really use that information to your advantage. Now you have to be very strategic about how you choose to use that information. You know, if 9 out of 15 kids say Luke is the most selfish player on the team, you know, you have to be very careful how you use that, because you want to use it in a way that's going to hopefully help Luke grow and become selfless. So you have to be careful about, you know, do you call them out in front of the team? Do you talk about them individually? So that's up to you as a coach to decide. But you can really get some great insight. And the most powerful part of this is it takes away the kid's belief that, you know, coach doesn't like me, or coach just, you know, he thinks that, hey, look, I don't know what to tell you, but 12 out of 15 of your teammates said you are the least hardworking person on this team. That has nothing to do with me. That is what your brothers or sisters have all voted on. And how can we change that? First of all, do you agree with that? And if so, then explain why. You know, why would everyone consider you the least hardworking person on this team? If you disagree with it, why? Why do you think 12 people aren't accurately describing your work ethic? And I think that by polling the team and listening to their voices is really, really a valuable tool.
That's awesome. I really like that a lot. And last question, what is it now that you're looking to improve, or what are you trying to add to your bag, if you will? What's kind of the next thing that you're trying to refine?
Oh boy, there's a long list there. You know, as far as in the acute at this moment, I'm definitely working on a second book. So a follow-up to Raise Your Game, since I have a little bit more time to put pen to paper. Another thing that's been challenging for me is doing a lot of these virtual talks and presentations, because I'm so used to being in front of a group and in person, where I've learned to develop the intuition to get a feel for the room and get a feel for what things are working and what things aren't. And I've usually relied heavily on that feedback, you know, because you guys are all kind enough to mute yourselves when I'm talking. I'm not getting any feedback. And sometimes, I mean, not sometimes, that makes speaking much more challenging, because it's like, okay, is what I'm saying resonating or not?
Right.
Because if we were live, I would see you'd nod your heads, or you'd lean down to write something down. And I'd know, hey, if I say something and all of a sudden 12 heads go down and start to write it down, then this is working. They're finding this helpful. So for me, I'm using this as an opportunity to sharpen my sword and develop new skills that I haven't necessarily had to develop before, for the reasons that I mentioned. So I am embracing this time. Yes, I look forward to getting back to whatever normal is going to look like.
Right.
I can't wait to get on stage. I can't wait to get a haircut. I can't wait to go back to the gym. But in the meantime, I want to take advantage of what makes this a very unique time, because I'm certainly hoping that none of us are going to be on a 50 to 60 day house arrest for the rest of our lives. So if this is the only time in my entire life that this is going to happen, then I want to milk it for everything I can and take advantage of as many things as I can.
I love it. And as we close it out here, Alan, where can we access some more of your content?
The main hub is alansteinjr.com. And I actually created a free page of resources. It's alansteinjr.com/free. Now, keep in mind, folks, that most of my current work is directed at the corporate world, not necessarily to coaching. But know that everything that I share to the corporate world comes through the lens of a basketball performance coach and comes through with that coaching mindset. So the stuff that's on that page is still very applicable to coaching. You'll just have to be the one that kind of translates that. And, you know, my heart will always be with coaches. I believe coaches and teachers, are right next to first responders and folks in the medical world as far as being a truly altruistic profession. You guys do what you do because you love the game and because you love helping young people. And I'll always do everything I can to serve anyone that's in that coaching fraternity. On social, I'm at Alan Stein Jr. On Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn. I do post some stuff there that's a little bit more sport and basketball and coaching specific. But I think the best thing you can do is check out the book if you haven't already. You can just go to raiseyourgamebook.com. The book was written very intentionally to target both of my worlds, my previous world of basketball coaches like you all, as well as the corporate world. So I know there's tons of stuff in there that that you all will find valuable, your players will find valuable. If anyone listening, if you want to get a team set, I can sign each copy and can get you those pretty quickly and can give you a 42% discount. Just drop me an email, alan@alansteinjr.com. What lots of coaches have been doing during this quarantine time has been ordering sets of books for their team. And then to practice safe social distancing, they either mail each player an individual copy or they just leave them on their front doorstep and tell players to come by, individually and pick one up. And then many groups have been doing kind of a team weekly book read where they say, hey, everybody needs to read chapter 1 by next Monday, and then we'll jump on a group Zoom call and let's talk about it. And, with everything I've mentioned before about the importance of listening and autonomy and all that, it could be something for you guys to help your teams improve since you can't actually be on the court.
Awesome. I appreciate it. And thank you for sure for doing this. I mean, I think we all got better today. So thank you very much. And coaches, we don't stop with just Alan today. We've got a Twitter talk tonight with Dusty May, head basketball coach at Florida Atlantic University. He's doing great things already there. So jump on Twitter around 9 p.m. Eastern tonight. We're going to do that and keep this momentum going. Guys, we're pushing out new content every day. We've got Josh Thompson, head basketball coach at Bar Reeve, going to do a Zoom on Friday at 10:30. So tune into that on our Zoomin in page. And Coach Dolan, who's in the house right now, we're going to push out his article tomorrow on the website. So we got a lot of stuff, and we're excited about the direction. And Alan, obviously, thank you for kind of springboarding it.
Absolutely. My pleasure. You guys have a great afternoon. Thank you.